most thoughtful contributors to this debate about how you put capital markets on a more long-term footing, how you bring a bit more patience back to the table. And I mean, I think you've also reflected in the past on the role that institutional investors need to play in this equation. Is this a space where you think there is a consensus beginning to build for reform, or are we still some way away from that? That's for Xavier.
That's for me. Well, you were raising expectations in terms of calling for my thoughtful contribution. I grew up in a sink estate, and I can tell you that one of the greatest resources that I've ever seen in terms of creativity and entrepreneurial spirit, although it's obviously not in its majority applied to legal enterprises and legal endeavors, is the incredible resourcefulness that one finds in very poor neighborhoods, in urban environments. I found the same in Eastern Paris as I found in Eastern London. I think there's general agreement that capitalism is the system that creates the most wealth. We've tried many other systems, and none have come close. And I was particularly warmed by the comments that I will remember from His Grace's presentation about the fact that it's a wealthy earth that we've been put on. And it's up to us to increase that wealth. But there's also the other point that I got from Archbishop Justin's presentation is the weak can be strong. And we do need long-term solutions. There are 26 million unemployed people in the European Union. How are we going to find jobs for the 26 million? And how are we going to find good jobs for the others? And as well, of course, for the 26 million. What I think is universally derided, including by some business people, whether they're a member of the CBI or not, are two things about the capitalist economy. One is the boom-bust cycle, where periods of very fast accelerating economy are succeeded by crashes. And it's very difficult for human nature to adjust to that change, and it's obviously extremely destructive. But it's also the concentration, as we've heard, of wealth and power at the top, the 1%, 99. And there's many things we can do about that: taxation, education. But there's also something that we don't do enough, because fundamentally, and this is particularly applicable to Europe, our societies and the way that we apply the mechanisms of capitalist economy in Western Europe are focused essentially on debt. And I'll make the link, if you'll allow me a couple of seconds, with the creation of good jobs and the creation of wealth and the sharing of wealth. The financing of companies in Europe depends to the tune of in excess of 80% on a system that is highly concentrated in the hands of a very, very small number of financial institutions that enjoy, and most people don't know, a very large fiscal subsidy as they build up their balance sheet. The banks lend. It's very important that they can lend. It's very important that they can accelerate the velocity of money to create investment and employment opportunities for business. But as they leverage up excessively, in the process of doing so, creating very large bonus pools for banking employees, as they leverage 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, there were banks that were leveraged 60 times in 2008. They continue to enjoy that subsidy. Then they're bailed out by taxpayers, at least some of them. And we have in Europe, and this applies both to the private economy but also to the public sector, where governments have accumulated a huge amount of debt, a financing system which is based on debt. Now, there is another medium of financing which is called equity, which is risk capital, which is heavily taxed, whereas debt is heavily subsidized. In fact, it's taxed 4 times through the life cycle. And if it were delivered, instead of distributed from the top, coming from a central bank, effectively the government and a small number of financial intermediaries, if risk capital were distributed at the bottom of the scale, we'd be able to do something else. Distribute capital at the bottom. If you distribute most of the capital from the top, a lot of it is going to stay at the top. If you enable a much wider segment of the population to create their own businesses, I mentioned the 26 million unemployed workers in the EU. There are 23 million small and mid-sized enterprises in the European Union. And many of them tell us that their number one issue is access to capital so they can grow. By the way, these SMEs tend to be based on innovation. They offer something new, a service. It can be a piece of technology. It can be new science. They have pricing power. They create good jobs. They're going to hire educated people, but also people that are less educated and provide supporting jobs. Yet, risk capital is very difficult to secure and is extremely highly taxed. So what about, with a view to enable these small and mid-sized enterprises to have easier access to small chunks of the capital they need, and that's not bank debt, certainly not at the startup level. Bank debt means a lien, a mortgage on your house if you're an entrepreneur, means servicing of the debt. Equity means the investor is aligned with your investment objectives, takes the chance of a potential bankruptcy, will not ask for servicing through coupon payments or other of that capital, and takes the upside. That alignment of interest, that redistribution of capital, and that recalibration of the way our financial markets function is very important because it's going to help millions, and there are 4.8 million of these SMEs in the United Kingdom, to create a lot more wealth with the appropriate type of capital in the appropriate amount at the right cost so that they can create more jobs much more quickly. If we want to have a long-term solution, assuming that we want to operate in a capitalist economy, that is a political choice. It's not a choice for business to make, but for citizens. But if we want to leverage the power of the capitalist economy, let's use risk capital. Let's make it available to individuals, to entrepreneurs, so a lot more of that wealth, rather than being distributed through debt mechanism, can be contributed to entrepreneurs, whether they are graduates leaving universities or whether they are poor people coming out of poor neighborhoods. And you may say, well, that's a figment of your imagination that will never happen. Consider the example of the Prince's Trust in the United Kingdom. In the last 25 years, the Prince's Trust has helped children, young teenagers, young people with significant issues, either with their education, truancy issues, mild delinquency, broken families, drug addiction in some cases, has helped the creation of 65,000 new businesses by providing a little bit of seed capital, providing them guidance. And I think this is an issue that business, government, and other stakeholders, unions and many others, where we could do a lot better in Europe. What about recalibrating also the way the capitalist economy functions? What about moving away from debt and its addictive power of creating not only a very volatile economy with frequent bankruptcies, but also a distribution of capital, which makes it much harder through the high concentration of the distribution of capital through a very concentrated banking and financial services market. What about looking at a different vehicle, different model? And there's many opportunities, private equity, venture capital, crowdfunding. There is an ongoing democratization of the distribution of capital. I think governments and politicians throughout the EU are starting to realize that it's also about giving the opportunities to those whom you would not necessarily think of as capable of creating new services, new wealth, new innovation. That is something that business is actually very good at. That is a resource, and the weak of this society is the contribution that they can make to our economy. They tend to be extremely innovative, something that all of us in business tend to lose after a little while as we get maybe a bit complacent or we get a bit routine-based in our activities. So I think there is also, for the long term, besides the traditional tools of taxation and, frankly, education, there is also the way we control, and this is a power question. Who actually distributes capital? Who gets access to it? And are we going to empower a new generation of young entrepreneurs, millions of them, in fact, in the European Union? May they come from poor or rich background, are we going to empower them to establish their ideas, create new wealth and employment?
It's a pretty big point, this, isn't it? Because, I mean, I serve the constituency in Britain with the highest youth unemployment. And what is very striking when I talk to young people in Hodge Hill about what is their kind of top priority for their MP, is it, bringing in extra money for arts, media, drama, cricket pitches, sports centres? Actually, the thing that has always topped the poll is learning a new skill, e.g. starting a business. So that there is definitely an entrepreneurial generation that is coming through that actually could be better connected with capital and the opportunities to get going. Striking. Barbara, one of the reasons that I'm an optimist in this debate, though, is